Good morning everyone. I am Mrs. Priyanka Sharma. Today I am going to teach you history chapter number 1 of 9th class, the French Revolution. In this chapter we will cover few of the topics: introduction, the French society of during the late 18th century, the outbreak of the revolution, abolishment of monarchy, role of women in revolution, the abolition of slavery, revolution and everyday life, and Napoleon dictatorship. In the introductory part, the Bastille Destruction, which has shown in this, I'll try to describe it. How this incident took place. Bastille Destruction, what were the causes behind it? During that time, who was the king? And what were the consequences were developed during that time? So on 14 July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. Behind it, it was the reason that king had commanded troops to move into the city. Because of it, rumors spread that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. And due to this reason, around 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. Finally, a group of several hundred people marched towards the eastern part of the city and stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunition. In the fight, the commander of Bastille fort was killed and prisoners released, though there were only 7 of them. Yet the Bastille was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. In the previous slide, I taught you that how the Bastille fort was destroyed. Because of that, during the 1789 to 1804, how the dictatorship was abolished, how the France became a republic country, and then afterward how dictatorship was established over there. So in this case, what the incident took place, we will elaborate that. So here, in the very next module, we will tell you that France society during the late 18th century. This topic is classified into 5 under subheadings: King Louis XVI rule, a society of estate, a struggle to survive, the rise of middle class, the contribution of philosophers. So in this, we will tell you that how King Louis XVI ruled over the France when he became king. Since the last 13th century to 18th century, Bourbon family ruled over the France. In France, many of the changes occurred during that time, and when the people had become aware about the condition of them, they had started protesting against of the system. Because of that, many of the social cause, many of the political cause, as well as economic cause became the responsible for the occurrence of French Revolution. So we will look into the matter that how the French Revolution occurred. So firstly, I would like to tell you that Louis XVI became king in 1774, and he was also from a Bourbon family. When he became king, he found his treasure empty. And he got married at the age of 20 and got married with the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. So when he became king, as I already have taught you, that his treasure were empty. So long years of war have drained the financial resources of the country. Apart from this, France supported the 13 American colonies in their freedom struggle against the British. This added to the economic problem of the France. Louis XVI, to resolve the situation, he tried to increase the taxes and to meet the expenses and increase the income of the government. So, in this topic, I would like to tell you that how the king tried to resolve the situation and how the king became an extravagant person for the country. So here, as Marie Antoinette, she was also a luxurious lady, and she also believed in an extravagant life. So due to her nature as well as of king's nature, as he tried to expend lot of amount to maintain the immense palace of Versailles. So these all the things were made responsible to the Louis XVI for the French Revolution. Now, after this we will see on the part of the classification of French society. So as here estate word is mentioned. What is an estate? So estate was the classification of French society. The classification of French society is known as estate. Basically French society was, during the 18th century, French society was divided into three parts: first estate, second estate, third estate. In first estate, 8% clergy people were consisted. In second estate, 2% nobility people consisted. And in third estate, around 90% population consisted from the common people. Most of the good or educated allied were belonging from this group: small farmer, artisan, very small farmer, laborer, servant. Many of these were in that. So what kind of the situations were developed by the classification of this French society? We will see here. The French society was divided into three estates, as we already have spoken regarding that. That was clergy, nobility, and third estate, common people. So the first two estates, the clergy and nobility, were called the privileged classes. They were exempted from paying taxes to the state. It means that they need not to pay the taxes to the state. Only the third estate people, they have to pay the taxes. They only had to render services to the landowners. There were two types of the taxes more, that was known as tithe and tithe. Tithe was the tax which was paid to the church. It was a religious tax. One more tax which was tithe, that was a direct tax and paid to the state. That was levied over the many of the goods and services. Now, our next topic is, in this picture, it is shown there that how the peasant had been trapped under the web of the autocratic person. A person who is from a royal family, how he is exploiting all the benefits of the peasants. In European society, as landed aristocracy was followed, so most of the land was occupied by the richer section of the society, and remaining 40% land was only was distributed among the poor people. So whatever they had, as the taxation system was developed within the French society, so whatever they produced, they had to offer to the aristocratic person. So due to which they had suffered a lot, or apart from this, taxation system was also imposed over them, which made the conditions worse. B part has been exist. Okay, the struggle to survive. What were the conditions which made for the citizens of France condition not accommodable? Here, the population of France rose about 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. This led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grain. So the prices of the bread rose rapidly. Apart from this, severe cold. Due to the severe cold, bad harvest was there. So due to bad harvest, the scarcity of food grain was developed within the France. Things became worse whenever the drought or hail reduced the harvest. This led to the subsistence crisis. So now we will look into that what is subsistence crisis. An extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. This situation is called as subsistence crisis. After the subsistence crisis, you may see this flow chart. and by which it can be very well understood that how the subsistence crisis developed a situation within the French society. Bad harvest, which tells that how the severe cold affected the food grain. Scarcity of food grain as the harvest was bad, which developed scarcity of food grain. Rising food price. Due to the scarcity of food grain, the rising of food prices were developed. The poorest can no longer buy the bread. After that, you can say that food riots were developed within the French society. People were no longer to buy the bread, and that is why they were not able to access the bread. So that is why weaker bodies. Disease and epidemics, as they couldn't have bread and properly meal, so that is why many of the disease and epidemic influenza, and which rose the number of the deaths, increased number of the deaths. After this, we will move on to the part of that, the rise of middle class. Here, many of the people who belonging from the middle class, basically among of them, farmer and poor people were there, who couldn't help themselves. So many of the people who were from the educated group and philosopher from the first and second estate, they came up and tried to help them. So in this case, in the 19th century, a new social group emerged who were called the middle class. They had become rich through expansion of overseas trade and from the manufacture of the goods, such as woolen and silk textile that were either exported or bought by the richer member of the society. In addition to the merchant and manufacturer, there were lawyers and administrative officials who were educated and believed that no group of the society should be privileged by birth, but their position should depend on merit. They demanded an end to the privileges. So at the last, what was the contribution of these middle people? As they all were educated and they could know that in European society, many of the people were illiterate. They were not knowing about their right, they were not familiar with their rights. So how could they help them? So for knowing about that, we may see this part, that how they had helped the poor people and the farmers. So in this, philosophers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the Montesquieu believed in the society based on the freedom, equal law and opportunity for all. In his two treatises of government, John Locke sought to refute the doctrine of divine and absolute right of the monarch. Rousseau proposed a government based on a social contract between the people and representative. In his book, The Spirit of Law, Montesquieu proposed a division of power within the government between the legislative and executive and judiciary. The ideal of philosophers were discussed intensively in French society. By inspiring these ideas, French people had protested against the system of the privileges. By seeing all these points, we may get to know about that, how the philosopher tried to resolve the situations by writing, by spreading message through their books and through their general pamphlets, how they had made aware French society aware from their right, because all these ideas were intensively discussed at the crowded place, so that the people who are not educated and literate, they may also become aware by their right. So by knowing about their right, the people had started protesting against of the system, and they were not satisfied with the king's rule, and many of the things were occurred during that time, which developed the situation of revolution during that time. So outbreak of revolution, how it had been developed during that time. So basically, as the King Louis XVI had lots of burden of taxes, had lots of burden of debt, so how he need to fulfill all these demands. So for this purpose, he need to call an Estates General. So now Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state. In France, of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. So in this case, what he need to do? What he need to call an Estate General. And now the question arises here, what is an Estate General? Estate General was an assembly in which from all three estates, the 300 representative from first estate, 300 representative from second estate, and 600 representative from third estate was sent. Then after the discussion from all these three estate representatives, Louis XVI could plan that the taxes should be increased at what extent. So here, in France of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. So rather he has to call a meeting of the Estate Generals to pass proposal of new taxes on 5th May 1989. Louis XVI called together an assembly of Estate General to pass proposal of new taxes. Peasants, artisans and women were denied to entry to the assembly and participate in the meeting. Each estate had one vote. The third estate demanded one vote for all members of the assembly. There was a system of the Estate General. I would like to elaborate this thing. Whenever the Estate General was called by the king, so this assembly had a formal rule that from each group, one only vote will be given to the king. It means that the two votes always go in the favor of the king. So the third vote, which was from the common people, was not in favor of the king. They couldn't do anything. So that is why common people this time had demand that one person, one vote, one value should be there. So due to this reason, they had demanded that each and every person of the third estate or each and every person of the Estate General should have their own vote, so that they could come up from their own demand. So when the king rejected the proposal of the third estate, they boycotted the assembly in protest and held their meeting in the half of a tennis court and declared themselves in the National Assembly. Meanwhile, the rest of the France was seething with the turmoil because a bad harvest led to increase in bread prices and hoarding. Crowds of angry women stormed the shops. There were rumors that landlord had hired some peoples to destroy the ripened crops, so the peasant attacked them, looted and burning the document containing record of manorial dues. Finally, the king agreed to constitutional monarchy rule on 4th August 1789. The assembly abolished taxes and tithes, and the land owned by church were confiscated. It means the things which were going on during the French society in 18th century, at the time, the people were not satisfied not only with the economic situation as well as by the political situation, as king did not do anything for them to solve their pathetic situation. So for that, which developed the anger and agitation among the French people, and people had demanded to be a constitutional monarch to the king. Firstly, king rejected to be a constitutional monarch, but later on he became, as the situation was not under the control, so he was ready to be a constitutional monarch. Now, France became a constitutional monarch. How he would become, how he became a constitutional monarch, we will see in this slide. The National Assembly completed the draft of the Constitution in 1791 in order to limit the power of the monarch. These powers were now separated and assigned to different institutions, the legislature, executive and judiciary. This made France a constitutional monarchy. The constitution started with the declaration of the right of men and citizens. Rights such as the right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law were established. as natural and inalienable right. These rights belonged to each human being by birth and could not be taken away. As all these rights have been discussed, so here it had been tried to show that which kind of the rights were not provided to the people. Common people were in favor of that. They were again and again trying to demand for their own right. So when King had agreed to be a constitutional monarch, the people of the France, they had demanded to access all these rights. Although Louis XVI had assigned the constitution, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. A republic is a form of government where the people elect the government, including the head of government. There is no hereditary monarchy. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by a court on the charge of treason on 21st January 1793. He was executed at the Palace de la Concorde publicly. This is a flowchart by which you can understand how the National Assembly was formed, and then afterward what kind of the situation, how the people had how they were nominated to be a member of the National Assembly. So see there, in this flowchart it has been told that passive citizen. Firstly, this term shows that passive citizen, the people who couldn't have right to vote, they were known as passive citizen. Active citizen, the people who had right to vote, they were known as active citizen. In this group, the no voting right, in passive citizen group, no voting right, about 300 men were consisted from it. Women, children and youth below 25 years were from passive citizen. Active citizen, these people were entitled to vote. About 4 million people of the population of 28 million were consisted from this group. So when the election held and some of the political body had participated in that, so among of them hardly 50,000 men who were actively nominated, and then afterward the National Assembly, in National Assembly 745 members were nominated. When the National Assembly formed, it had a control over the France as well as over the ministers. So likewise, it had control over the judiciary also. So this flowchart tells that how the National Assembly was formed and it had all over the country control. In this formation of the National Assembly, the richer section of the society, it only could have right to vote. But the rest of the people who were not belonging from this society or they were not able to pay the taxes, they couldn't have right to vote. The people who were from the less prosperous section, they were kept as passive citizens. Only the people, those who could have paid 3 days equal wages, they only were kept in the category of active citizens. Now, due to this political situation, the people were very dissatisfied, and then that is why an agitation rose among of them. And due to this reason only, the French Revolution had